Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast with Mike Tagliere, and I'm Bobby Sylvester. We're on Twitter at Mike Tagliere NFL and at Bobby Fantasy Pro. Tags, how's it going today, man?
It's going good, man. It's I don't know what the reason is, but I woke up today and I realized it's like I'm like getting close to finishing up my week 11 content, which is just crazy because it feels like the fantasy season just started like a couple weeks ago. You know, usually I get to the point like this point in the season where I'm like, man, we're on the final stretch where it's like, whew, like get through to week 13, week 14, and then you feel like you're at the home stretch. But I don't know, man. I've been having fun this season, and it's crazy. I think I'm getting ready for like everybody to attack us next week though, because with the Rams and Chiefs coming on by, I'm sure that's going to bring a lot of people into a different mood.
You've been having fun, which means you did not draft Le'Veon Bell anywhere, because I guarantee his owners are very upset. Tags, our guest today is Jeff Ratcliffe of Pro Football Focus. He's on Twitter at Jeff Ratcliffe. He's the perfect guy to have on these Start-Sit podcasts because he always does so well in these ranking contests. So listen closely to his advice if you're listening to the podcast right now. Jeff, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, yeah. Happy to be on the show. And this morning on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, I issued an official apology for recommending Le'Veon Bell in the first round to, ignore all of the hype and just pick him anyway. And what's funny is that so many people think I'm actually serious. So that's the best part right there. But I do agree with Tags, man. This whole season has flown by, and I have more energy probably right now than I ordinarily have ever had at this point of the year.
So we were talking on the last show about how they were maybe going to play this game in Mexico City. It would maybe be pushed back to week 12. Like Tags mentioned, they are going to play that game, but it's going to be in Los Angeles. There's really not that much more news to talk about. We still don't know what's happening with Joe Flacco. Teron Armstead is out 3 to 4 weeks. That's a pretty big blow for the Saints offensive line. Should be back for the playoffs. I don't really think it affects any of their offensive skill players all that much. Not enough to bench anyone who would be an obvious start anyway. Anything else you guys want to talk about news-related, Tags?
I don't think so. I mean, honestly, I'm just like excited to talk some sit starts today. There's some players that I'm kind of on the fence about that I'd like to hear Jeff's take on.
Absolutely. And here's the thing is, like, when the three of us get on a podcast, we all really like to talk. So we end up going way too long. So it's probably best that we just get right into it. Before we do, though, I want to tell you all, we've got a signed Dalvin Cook Vikings helmet to give away. You can sign up for that at fantasypros.com/contest. We're going to be picking one lucky listener to give that bad boy away to. Again, that's fantasypros.com/contest. Okay, so the way we do these shows, Jeff, and you've done these before, but for those listening at home, you might not know, we go position by position, and we're only going to be talking about players who are on the borderline of being startable. So like in a 12-team league, quarterbacks ranked 7 through 16 for the week. We're not obviously going to talk about Patrick Mahomes, who's projected for like 29 fantasy points this week against the Rams, or Jared Goff also in that shootout. But some guys don't know what to do with Andrew Luck. This Titans defense is playing significantly better. Now, he just lit up the Jags last week. He's a must-start, right, Jeff?
I don't know if he's a must-start. I mean, if you have Patrick Mahomes, it's not a must-start situation. And by the way, everybody on Twitter, like, if you have Patrick Mahomes and Cam Newton, you're good. It doesn't matter who you start this week, okay? Don't fret it. But, yeah, Andrew Luck, the thing about Luck that I love so much is the fact that he has eyes for the end zone. And, keep in mind, yes, he threw 3 scores against the Jags. So did Carson Wentz, and they both did it against the Jags secondary that was without A.J. Bouye. So that's a different defense with him not on the field. But with Luck this week, right now, currently sitting at number 10 for me. So if you're in a situation where you have Ben Roethlisberger and Luck, then yeah, I'd lean Luck. If you're in a situation where you have, like I said, Mahomes or you have Wentz, I'd probably be leaning that direction. So it's a great call out. He's definitely been on fire. He's definitely returned value from where he was drafted. But I don't know if he is necessarily must start this week.
I think that's a fair way to put it. I've got him at QB6 this week. I mean, he's just rolling right now. And I know after the first 3 weeks, everyone was panicking. Like, where's his velocity? Is he ever going to be the same? He's back, guys. I mean, 6 straight games with 21-plus fantasy points. Tags, are you playing him?
Yeah, I mean, I have Luck at number 7 right now. I feel somewhat comfortable playing him. It is a little worrisome that the Titans actually woke up and they decided that Malcolm Butler needs to go away from the top receivers. So they actually used Adoree Jackson in shadow coverage on Josh Gordon. And they're going to do the same thing, I would imagine, with T.Y. Hilton. Jackson has speed, maybe not as much speed as Hilton, but he's a good athlete. Let's just leave it at that. The Titans are one of the 3 teams in the NFL who has still yet to allow a quarterback more than 23 fantasy points. So Luck has played well, but I do think his ceiling is a little bit capped in this game. I don't think it's going to be like an explosion game where you need to play him in DFS and things like that. I would be contemplating between someone and him, and like let's say that someone drafted him and Russell Wilson. Like if you had Russell Wilson, I'd probably go Luck, but it's really close between the two.
I've got Luck by a fair amount this week. I mean, Wilson, he has been playing a lot better. He's been throwing more passes, but still not enough to compete with Andrew Luck throwing, 750? That's his pace this season. Can we get this guy some wide receivers? Like maybe Le'Veon Bell can go over there and catch some passes out of the backfield. He has no weapons, and he's still doing this.
I don't know. It's really tough to like love anything that's going on here. I just like Tennessee's defense has been so good. They've held a lot of teams under 20 points in games. So it's just like I think people continually underrate their defense. This is a divisional game. I don't know. I don't know. It's tough. But what do you think about Russell Wilson? How do you feel about him this week?
Well, the challenge with Russell Wilson this season is obviously the priority of the offense being run. And now that they essentially have three viable options, I mean, every time we see Penny do anything half decent, the coaching staff like walks him back. So Schottenheimer comes out like, yeah, well, he doesn't really know the offense. So. Yeah. But, I mean, either way, I know that's going to be a conundrum if you have Chris Carson, if you have Mike Davis, if you picked up Rashad Penny this week. But that hurts the overall upside of the offense. But as I mentioned, it's the end zone throws that I've been tracking this season that are really crucial here. Over the first 5 games of the season when Russell was doing essentially nothing, he wasn't throwing to the end zone. He's been on fire with that lately. Mm-hmm. He has 28 on the season. That's only 5 behind Luck, who leads the league with 33. That bodes positively for Russell Wilson. And I think that's a great call out too, because I have Wilson at 9 and Luck at 10. And for me, when I do rankings like that, when I'm making my own start-sit decisions, I don't go very robotically and like must start Russell Wilson because he's one position ahead. Yeah. I mean, it's so razor thin there. It's so razor thin between those two that it is a true coin flip. And it depends. Like, do you want maybe the higher ceiling guy? Could be Wilson, actually. Higher floor guy, Luck, but that's a tricky matchup against Tennessee, plus a divisional game, so they know the Colts well. It's super close. But I do like Russell Wilson going forward. I just wish those pass attempts would increase.
I'm really encouraged by him finally running the ball, too. 14 attempts in the last 2 weeks. I don't know if this is a new trend where they realized, like, hey, man, we got to win, so go ahead and run the ball, or whatever it is, but I'm definitely encouraged enough to put Wilson within my top 12 this week. I haven't really been having him there, and we've been suffering as a result of that because he keeps getting 2-3 touchdowns, right? A couple other guys on the fence here. Matt Ryan against Dallas, Deshaun Watson against Washington. If you had to choose between these two, Jeff, which one would you go with?
Again, super close. I am going to lean Deshaun Watson, and what really stands out to me is when you look to the yardage production. Like, okay, Ryan Fitzpatrick, by a lot of accounts, was a disaster for fantasy last week, even though he outscored Tom Brady, even though he outscored Cam Newton. But you look at what Washington gave up, it was 406 passing yards. The week before, 350 passing yards. The week before that, 47 attempts, 316 to the Giants. I mean, 357 passing yards per game over the last 3. That obviously bodes well for Deshaun Watson, who now has Demaryius Thomas in-house, and I expect Thomas to not be calling timeouts because he doesn't know the play this time round. He has a little bit more time to get up to speed here. So I like Watson. I mean, I have these guys 7 and 8. So again, back-to-back in my rankings, pretty darn close. The concern with Matt Ryan is that it hasn't been him this season. He's been blessed with receivers who can run after catch. He has not thrown the ball to the end zone very frequently. I mean, the 4-touchdown game that he had, 2 weeks ago, none of those came on end zone throws. Comparatively, I've been talking up Eli Manning and said there's a big touchdown game that's coming. He just threw 3 touchdown passes, and he had 4 end zone throws in the game. All 3 of those touchdown passes came on end zone receptions. So, there's a big difference between those two. And it's the damper that I have on Matt Ryan, sort of capping him because, that means more boom or bust potential with him if he's not making those throws.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of the equation, but I don't know if it's going to be part of the equation against Dallas because they don't allow those big plays. They've been great at defending that, so I agree. I've got Watson 1 spot ahead of Matt Ryan this week. Both are within my top 10, though. Tags, where do you have the guys?
Well, Jeff hit the nail on the head for me. Okay, so the Falcons have players that can run after the catch. Dallas has allowed almost a 70% completion ratio to opposing quarterbacks. It's one of the highest rates in the NFL. They haven't allowed a high touchdown rate. They've been keeping the plays in front of them, but I don't think they have the cornerback talent to hang with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. Mohamed Sanu is getting better, getting healthier. Here's what I noticed when going through the Cowboys this week. So they've held 6 of 9 teams to 20 points or less. So that's like obviously a really good stat, but the ranks of the offenses they've played in terms of points per game, they have played one team that's inside the top 15 offenses in the NFL. The Falcons are obviously one of those teams that's going to be there. So I'm not, and the one team that they did play was Cam Newton and the Panthers, which was way back early in the season. And we all know that Cam Newton's kind of up and down in his production. We don't rely on him for consistent production. So I like Matt Ryan. I don't know why people are continually worrying about benching him. Like ever since the defense has kind of like lost touch with reality and like giving up, point after point after point. He had his least efficient game last week and he still wound up, with I think it was a top 10 fantasy performance. So that kind of shows you his floor. I like Matt Ryan at home against Dallas. I think Dallas can score on Atlanta's defense. This game has sneaky like shootout potential.
Well, you mentioned that defense too. Sorry to cut in here, but let's not forget Deion Jones he could be back on the field as early as this week. And that is a key cog to that defense. He's borderline elite at the linebacker position, was injured at the very beginning of the season, and we saw that run defense really tank after that. He wasn't the only player who was injured, but getting him back, he'll plug the middle, certainly in that second level, and that will help the cause a little bit for that Falcons defense.
All right, guys, 2 tricky quarterbacks here. We've got Ryan Fitzpatrick, who again had 400 yards, and he was named the starter, but that's the thing is, they have to name him the starter. Who knows if they're going to take him out after he throws 3 interceptions again and put Jameis Winston in there. And then we've got Mitch Trubisky, who's just been a wonderful fantasy football player this year, except for the 1 week in week 9. He had a tough one against Arizona in week 3. But he goes up against Minnesota this week. What do we do with these two, Jeff?
Start Trubisky. If you have Trubisky, you're starting him at this point. The thing that I like the most about Trubisky is that he adds so much with his legs. A very underrated aspect of his game when you consider just how many rushing yards he's had this season, plus the fact that he's shown that it wasn't just that 1 week wonder. He's been able to really carry that momentum, having Anthony Miller emerge for this team. And Anthony Miller is a special player, and I'm glad we're finally getting to see it. Having those weapons, I mean, yeah, sure, Jordan Howard's on the team, but ultimately the rest of the team is pretty exciting here. So I like him over Fitzpatrick just because the Ryan Fitzpatrick implosion is always, essentially just one snap away, and it could happen at any point. We saw almost that happen. I mean, they couldn't get anything done in the red zone last week. The Giants aren't an awe-inspiring defense by any means, but any defense could completely light Fitzpatrick up. So I actually have him outside of my top 12. I have Trubisky at 11 right now. I
do too. I've got Fitzpatrick at 14. I've got Trubisky at 10. Tags, where do you have these two, and what do you think about them?
I'm actually a little low on Trubisky this week. Playing against Minnesota, it is that divisional game we talk about. These two teams haven't met since Nagy came to the Bears. Now, Trubisky has been getting better week over week, but this is more about the Minnesota defense than it is about Trubisky. And if you were to remove just the one game that the Vikings played when they traveled on a short week out to LA across the country, if you take out that week, they've allowed just 232 passing yards per game with 0.9 touchdowns and 1 interception per game. So they've been back to that elite defense that we've talked about. They're better at home. That's absolutely true. But I just don't know if Mitch has the chops to throw against this defense. I do believe he comes with a fantasy floor, which is why he's still a top 15 quarterback for me. Because if you were to put his numbers and Cam Newton side by side, you'd see that Trubisky's the better passer. Cam has a little bit better results with his legs, but it's very close. So the comparison between those two is much smaller than people think. We consider Cam Newton a top 5 rest of season quarterback, but nobody puts Mitch in that conversation. I think I've gotten to the point where I've kind of admitted to myself that he's probably top 8 for the rest of the season, but this week I don't feel great about him in this game.
Guys, let's go a little bit deeper here. Obviously, Rivers and Cousins are already on there, and tougher matchups against, I guess Rivers against Denver isn't really tougher. Cousins against Chicago is a tough one. Do you like any of these guys over any of the players we've named so far, Jeff?
No, 14 and 15 for me. Rivers and Cousins. Yeah, that Bears matchup is no joke, as we know. It's not just the pass rush, it's the secondary that's been playing really good football. And then, I mean, even other sort of intangibles, like the emergence of Roquan over the last couple of weeks has really helped that defense as well. I just, as much as I like Cousins and the weapons, if you have Cousins this week, it is going to be pretty tough, because then, you look at like the two top streamers of the week, Dak and Mariota, for me, they're right after. So it's almost a coin flip between Cousins, Dak, and Mariota if you have that option.
Tex, who are you going with? Do you like either of these guys above anyone we've mentioned, maybe Fitzpatrick?
No, I like Dak the most of all of them. I like that Jeff mentioned him. Like, I have Dak as my number 11 quarterback. I love him this week.
I was going to ask about the streamers. I guess Dak is your favorite over Mariota. Eli Manning faced Tampa. Bortles against Pittsburgh.
Correct. My order would be Dak, Mariota, and then Eli. I don't think Eli's a bad play either. I think some people are worried about him. Jeff talking about the targets, that was a really good stat you threw out there. And obviously, Tampa Bay just doesn't have the cornerback talent to hang with the receivers that the Giants are going to throw at him. So Saquon Barkley will get his, but at the same time, Eli Manning, every single week, he's playing for his job. And Eli Manning, regardless of what people say about him, he's been pretty good under pressure in his career. And I this could be one of his final starts at MetLife Stadium. So I have Eli as a top 15 play this week. And I would probably start Eli Manning over Kirk Cousins this week. I worry about Kirk Cousins, the pressure that the Bears are going to put on him with Khalil Mack on the defense, and with him healthy. They've racked up, I think it's at least 4 sacks in every game when he's been healthy. He's been under pressure all season long. Stephon Diggs might not be at 100%. Bryce Callahan, the Bears slot corner, has played really well. Not sure he'll stop Adam Thielen, but he might contain him a little bit. So I don't like Cousins very much this week at all. And most people really don't realize that Kirk Cousins has not been great this year. He sits as the number 14 fantasy quarterback in points per game.
You're right.
He's right around Tom Brady.
Behind Dak Prescott.
Yeah, people are so down on Tom Brady, and it's like, well, Kirk Cousins hasn't had a great season, especially when you consider he's I think he's 5th in the NFL in pass attempts.
And he's got Adam Thielen, who everyone thinks is the top 5 fantasy player, and Stephon Diggs, who's a top 12 guy. Everyone was excited about Kyle Rudolph, Dalvin Cook. Cousins hasn't really done all that much. I agree. He's been better under pass rush this year, but still questionable enough that I don't want to play him. I'd rather play Manning face Tampa because, I mean, you talk about the end zone targets. Even beyond that, he's got Saquon Barkley and Odell Beckham who could take almost any play to the house and probably will for 1 or 2 against Tampa. I think that he's a good play this week, but again, I prefer Dak Prescott as a streamer. Now, Jeff, you mentioned Dak Prescott. What about Lamar Jackson? If we hear he's starting, would you have him above Prescott?
As tempting as it is, and I mean, I get sucked in by the luster. I don't think I could do that. What's so appealing about Lamar, obviously, is the elite level running ability. Right now, if you say out of the league starters, Trubisky and Cam are really, they're the top 2 in rushing yards. They're really the 2 best running quarterbacks. Lamar's better than both of them. There's no doubt in my mind from day one that he would be the best. But the problem is he's also got to throw the ball. And we saw his accuracy get a little better last year, believe it or not, than in his Heisman year. But even there, he struggled at the college level in terms of accuracy. So that's a problem. I mean, I don't know, I don't know if we could trust him from that vantage point. But over the long haul, though, I do still like him. It's just week 1 as a starter. I don't think I could do that one.
All right, guys, we're going to move on over to running backs here in just a second. But first, I want to remind you all, we've got a DFS show that we record on Thursdays. It comes out Thursday nights. You can listen to it on your Friday morning commute or however you want to do it. And on FanDuel, some of these contests that they've got going on, experienced players are excluded. I know a lot of you all are worried about, some of these sharks, like probably Jeff, I'm sure that you're a shark in DFS, will come in and just win the big prizes. Well, you don't have to worry about that. They've got the Sunday NFL Huddle, $150,000 they're giving away. Experienced players are excluded. So you've got a very fair shot. Or if you want to put money in with the big bucks, you can spend $100 and you only have to beat 1,700 people to win a serious prize in their NFL Cover 2. They've got games for everyone. Check out what they have on FanDuel.com. And if you haven't already, check out our DFS podcast. We give out a lot of interesting information for redraft leagues as well, not just for DFS. So hopefully that will continue to help you out. All right, guys, on over to the running back position. And it is ugly. Again, we've got 6 teams on bye, and there are going to be some players we have to start, like Doug Martin against Arizona. I know it's a good matchup. I don't want to play him, but I've got him well within my top 25. What about you, Jeff?
I have him at 21. I mean, you hear the reluctancy in my voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A couple of years ago on CBS Sports Network, I randomly said that I don't like old men in December, and I don't know if it means what you think it means, but basically, I don't think you win your fantasy championships with old running backs. That's part of the reason why I'm so concerned about Le'Veon Bell here, because he's going to be 27 next year. I mean, that's getting up there. I mean, C.J. Anderson, right? C.J. Anderson looked like he was about 10 years older than Frank Gore this season, and that dude's 26. So, Doug Martin getting up there, and yes, he's been spry, which is something you only say about old dudes anyway, but he's been spry this season. I mean, I guess you have to start him this week, but if he has a decent week, don't get sucked in by the luster of that. Don't think that, okay, now Doug Martin's just going to be a solid RB2 every single week, because I don't think that's what you're going to have on your hands.
Tags, how do you feel about Doug Martin? Would you rather play him than someone like Alex Collins?
Alex Collins is too low in the ECR. I'm going to have Alex Collins as a borderline RB1 this week. Alex Collins needs to be in every lineup. First, I'll just say Doug Martin. I think Jeff said it all in terms of and the thing is, Arizona's defense, they're looked at as like a walk all over them matchup. I don't think they necessarily are anymore. Under Steve Wilkes' defense, I think it just took some time for them to adjust to the scheme. And over the last 2 weeks, they've helped Kareem Hunt and Matt Breida to just 113 yards on 32 carries, no touchdowns. So those were two matchups that we expected Breida and Hunt to do well in. So, I mean, Martin is he's number 23 for me. I'm not in love with him. But as for Alex Collins, you're talking about a Ravens team that's coming off of a bye week, right? Their season is not only on the line, their playoff hopes, but their head coach's job is on the line too. I think John Harbaugh, unfortunately, he's now on the hot seat where it's every single week people are talking about it. And they're going to play a Bengals defense that's really struggled as of late. Ever since losing Ryan Glasgow on the defensive line, they have allowed massive, massive work on the ground. This team has faced 71.6 plays per game, which is second to only the Browns. So the thing is, the Ravens need to play a ball control style offense. I don't care who it is under center. If it's Lamar Jackson, it's going to help Alex Collins because it creates a dual threat, and teams have to account for that. If it's Joe Flacco, they're not going to have him throwing the ball all over the place because they can't risk him losing them the game. I think Alex Collins in this run game, I think that this team is going to run the ball 30-plus times this week, and I think Alex Collins is locked in for 15-plus touches against a Bengals defense that Mark Ingram was my play of the week last week. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to say Alex Collins is a must play. I don't really care who else you have. I'm playing Alex Collins this week.
All right, let's go for more shallow leagues like these 8 and 10 teamers. We get a lot of questions about guys like Marlon Mack, Mark Ingram, Joe Mixon against Baltimore. So let's say you've got all 3 of those on your team, Jeff, and you can start 2 of them. Which one are you leaving out? Joe Mixon at Baltimore, Mark Ingram face Philadelphia, Marlon Mack face the Titans.
It's probably going to be Marlon Mack. It's close between him and Ingram. I think Mixon, you got to start Mixon regardless. I know it's not a good matchup, obviously, and it's not a good situation when AJ is not on the field for that team. He is a gravitational force, but
you don't think that helps Mixon?
No, did it help him last week? It didn't help him. I mean, the team needs that guy to draw attention. It opens up more things that you can do for the offense. So, I mean, you look at what Marlon Mack was able to do last week. It was a tough matchup, and he really got not much done. I mean, the only thing that happened really in the run game was the one long Jordan Wilkins carry. That was about it. Otherwise, I mean, again, another tough matchup here. So I think you put him, and not to say that Mark Ingram's matchup is any good. I mean, Zeke lit that defense up, but he's the only guy who's done it really other than Saquon all season. So, I mean, it's super close, but yeah, I think Mixon you absolutely have to start, and then close to a coin flip, but I lean Ingram.
What do you think, Tags? Which of those 3 are you taking?
I agree. Tennessee is continually a tough matchup for running backs. There has still yet to be a running back who's scored 18 PPR points against them. They faced, James White, Sony Michel, Ezekiel Elliott, and the Titans just haven't stopped. Marlon Mack is still just a 55% of the snap type player. They're mixing in Jordan Wilkins a little bit, but Nyheim Hines is still getting snaps. So I don't like the matchup very much for Marlon Mack. I have him behind guys like Dalvin Cook and Tariq Cohen this week.
Yeah, and the Titans have been getting better as the season goes on against the run because they started off a little rough, and I was wondering, hey, is this suddenly a team we can pick on against the run? But I don't think that's the case. I've got them in the same order you guys said, Mixon, Ingram, Mack. Let's go a little deeper now. We've got guys like Jordan Howard face Minnesota, Tariq Cohen face Minnesota. People get mad at us every single week, Tags, if we pick Howard over Cohen or Cohen over Howard. It's just, it's a good split. You can play with these guys most every week. Derrick Henry. So let's take those 3 there, okay? Cohen, Howard, and Derrick Henry. I don't want to play him this week. Jeff, do you agree?
Well, I have him at 27, and really the only reason why I have him there is because of his red zone usage. That's what you're hoping for, because don't be a box score scout. Don't just look at the fantasy points. Deion Lewis is still ahead of him, and that's clear. but I don't know if I'd go as far as cutting him, because who are you cutting him for at this point? But Jordan Howard, both of those guys are on par for me. But Jordan Howard was a guy who I got hate tweets over in August because I tweeted out a GIF of a thumbs down when I said, "Is Jordan Howard going to be an RB1 this year?" And then I told people he was being overdrafted in the second round. Hate tweets, hate tweets, hate tweets, and lo and behold, here we are. The guy is inefficient. He's not a good fit in Matt Nagy's offense. Exactly what we thought. And he's touchdown dependent. So if he doesn't get in the end zone, you have a problem. And I just don't see him getting in the end zone against Minnesota. So, I would prefer Cohen. I do have Howard ahead of Henry, but I don't want to use either of those guys. So, it's Cohen, and then hopefully I have a better option other than Cohen.
Is there someone that most people wouldn't be thinking of that you would use ahead of them? Like maybe Josh Adams, Austin Eckler, Ito Smith?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far. Adams is a guy who I want on my roster, and I feel like I'm relatively high on him at 33, but it's just like over the last 3 games he's looked the best out of the Eagles running backs, and the fact that they didn't trade for a running back, and who knows if they really could have. We don't know what the Le'Veon Bell situation was. I mean, Jason LaCanfora told me that all it would have taken was a third, but was it a third and then you give yourself a headache beyond that? And we saw the Eagles were willing to give up a pick for a wide receiver. So either way, that instilled some confidence. And we saw Josh Adams at Notre Dame run really effectively behind a darn good offensive line. And in Philadelphia, they have a pretty darn good offensive line. So if anything, there's something there, but I don't think it's going to happen this week. I think this is, it's just continually ramping him up. He could be a nice factor, though, for the fantasy playoff run in December.
I've got Henry on a team, and I said I would drop him. I have dropped him in several leagues. I didn't draft him, but I picked him back up when other people dropped him. And I don't think there's much value there. I would drop him for someone like Spencer Ware, but if I need to play someone this week, I would rather go with Henry than guys like Adams, Eckler. I would probably play Jalen Richard at Arizona against him. Tags, how do you feel about this group we've been talking about?
I mean, Jordan Howard, I don't really want to play him. I really don't want to play Derrick Henry. I'm with Jeff on all this stuff. Like,
just quit if you have to play one of those guys, right?
That's the thing. I mean, I'd rather play Jordan Howard than Derrick Henry, but it's not by much. Tariq Cohen is the easy start for me of those. Like, it's not even close. And one player I think that people would be shocked to hear that I might think about starting over Jordan Howard is Peyton Barber against the Giants. I don't like the Giants at all. The Giants defense without Snacks Harrison, they've really struggled. I mean, they've allowed, I think it's over 270 rushing yards over the last 2 games without him. So, and that's included with Matt Breida and Adrian Peterson, who was missing multiple offensive linemen in that game. So Peyton Barber would be close for me if I had him and Jordan Howard deciding between the two. I'd be stuck deciding on Peyton Barber or Lamar Miller too. I don't think Lamar Miller is a good play.
What do we do with the Seattle backfield? Rashad Penny, Mike Davis, and then let's throw in one other name here, Wendell Smallwood against the Saints, because I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Eagles end up throwing a lot. Smallwood's been leading this Eagles team in snaps in the backfield. Do you like him compared to these Seattle guys, or would you rather go with the headache, Jeff?
Man, I mean, Chris Carson's going to also be in the mix there, too. We just don't know exactly what's going to happen. Pete Carroll was on SiriusXM NFL Radio yesterday and talked up all 3 of those guys, but in particular highlighted, he said, Chris is ready to get back and get going, and we really like what he's done. I mean, a paraphrase there, but we really like what he's done this season. So you have to figure if Carson's fully healthy, I think they kept the seat warm for him. And I don't think this is just, okay, we go right back to, or we go into a committee situation. I think we go right back to Chris Carson being the lead dog, Mike Davis being sprinkled in, and then Rashad Penny not getting much. So if you picked up Penny this week, don't get frustrated if that happens, because he's got premium handcuff value. You mentioned Spencer Ware, Bobby, a couple minutes ago, and I agree with you. Spencer Ware has premium handcuff value. Malcolm Brown has premium handcuff value. Even somebody like Rod Smith, or you go deeper, Jalen Samuels. Like, these are guys who I would much rather have on my bench than the Jamal Williamses of the world. Well, even though Jamal Williams kind of has handcuff value though as well if Jones goes down, or somebody like Giovanni Bernard. I mean, it's tough. It's a toss-up. If Mixon goes down, Bernard has upside, but wouldn't you rather have the guy in those hyper offenses? These are the decisions we have to make. And then, of course, it could all not happen, and it's not worth it in the end. But
either way, like, Jamal Williams isn't going to help you win a championship, so you might as well go for that.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, so you're shooting. I mean, because Malcolm Brown, if something happened to Todd Gurley, Malcolm Brown's an RB1.
Yep.
Same thing with Spencer Ware.
You're not worried about John Kelly? Because I know you watch a ton of tape. You like John Kelly in the preseason, right? I don't know anyone who didn't.
Yeah, I liked him, but the problem with John Kelly is that we viewed him more as a third down back, and Brown has shown already. I mean, that touchdown from 2 weeks ago was
pretty good.
It was really impressive. And so if he had an opportunity to be an every down guy, what's to say that he doesn't step in and be the sort of Larry Johnson to Priest Holmes, that just, all right, we didn't even skip a beat. Now, he's not Todd Gurley, and we know that, and I'm not even trying to suggest that, but the role in the offense, that offense is set up to produce points out of the running back position, the constant mismatches because 11 personnel is on the field 100% of the time. Even with Josh Reynolds, that's not going to change. So you have that. I mean...
Yeah, they're going up against, 15% stacked boxes?
Yeah, pretty much.
I think LeGarrette Blount would put up some good stats. Obviously not Todd Gurley stats, but anyone in this offense would be fine. And Malcolm Brown's talented.
Absolutely. So to go back to your original question.
Sorry.
No, I mean, hey, this is why I love coming on this show. I love just being able to talk about this stuff, and really relate it to fantasy. But it's if you have that Seattle backfield, hopefully you have the right piece of it. But, again, if you have Rashad Penny, you better be ready for Chris Carson to be the starter. And because right now, all right, I'm ranking Mike Davis as the top guy, but that's going to change tomorrow. I'm almost certain of it. And those guys are going to move around. So don't just set your lineup today and forget it. Obviously pay close attention to the news feed tomorrow.
Now, Tags, I feel like every single week you've got one or two of these guys at wide receiver and running back who no one else is even thinking of. They're not even on my radar until you tell me about it. And then I'm entirely convinced. And that's why you're in the top 10 in accuracy rankings right now for experts. Do you have one of those guys at running back for us this week?
I mean, one that's available in a lot of leagues that kind of blows my mind is Theo Riddick. With Matthew Stafford and the way that defense is playing right now, they're going to have to throw the ball to move it against Carolina. Carolina has really struggled against tight ends, and Detroit hasn't really used their tight ends. So I see that short area of the field, something that can be exploited against them. And with Marvin Jones dealing with a bone bruise in his knee, I don't know if he's going to play. And if he doesn't play, I think we could lock Theo Riddick in for 8+ targets. And that's just something that's hard to find on the waiver wire. But Theo Riddick, I think he's only owned in like 15-20% of leagues, so he's someone that I think has RB3 flex type value.
All right, guys, wide receivers here in just a second, but first I want to talk about another one of the sponsors of today's show, Roman. Guys are terrible at taking care of their health, whether it's a knee injury, bad back, or something worse. Guys are usually more comfortable just rubbing some dirt on it than seeing a doctor. I'm guilty of it myself. And that's the reason that I tore my Achilles tendon, is because I didn't go to the doctor after I hurt myself, and then it got even worse when I was just walking down the stairs. The same is true for erectile dysfunction for people. Studies show 70% of guys who experience ED don't get treated for it. Thankfully, Roman created an easy way to get checked out by a doctor and get treated for ED online. Roman is a one-stop shop where licensed U.S. physicians can diagnose ED and ship medication right to your door. With Roman, there's no waiting rooms, awkward face-to-face conversations, or uncomfortable trips to the pharmacy. You can handle everything discreetly online. All you have to do is visit getroman.com/fantasypros, fill out a brief medical onboarding, chat with the doctor, and get FDA-approved ED meds delivered to your door in discreet, unmarked packaging. Guys, go online and get checked by the doctor. Erectile dysfunction is a problem that guys don't tackle, but with Roman, it's really easy, so take care of it. For a free online visit, go to getroman.com/fantasypros. That's getroman.com/fantasypros for a free online visit. getroman.com/fantasypros. All right, guys, now at wide receiver, I'm going to start out with some plays that I think most people would probably consider must-starts, no matter how small your league is, who you have on your team. But a lot of people have been asking about Juju Smith-Schuster against Jacksonville. I'm not worried about this at all. I mean, Boye is injured. Jalen Ramsey, as we know, is going to be shadowing Antonio Brown just like he did last year. I mean, I've got Schuster inside my top 15. Are you with me, Jeff and Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
He's number 12 for me.
Okay, sounds good. Just wanted to clarify that for all the people asking questions. Now, a couple other guys that have been confusing people. Amari Cooper, I think that he's a lock start almost every week at this point, especially against Atlanta. Corey Davis at Indianapolis, I think that's a good play as well with Stephon Gilmore. Just saying Davis is a flat-out star. And then John Brown faced Cincinnati. I love the matchup. He's been bad the last 2 weeks, but I think that he's a start as well. Tags, I'll let you go first. Do you disagree that Davis, Cooper, and Brown are all wide receiver 2s this week?
I have Davis and Cooper in wide receiver 2 territory. John Brown is more of like a question mark to me. Like with the way that the offense has performed the last couple of weeks, I'm not really excited to play him right now. He struggled, and the thing is people are going to point to what he did against the Bengals the last time they played. But if you look at the first time he played the Steelers, he hit them up for over 100 yards and a touchdown, and then I think he totaled 15 yards the second time he played them. So it doesn't automatically equate to success. As I mentioned, I don't think that Baltimore is going to throw the ball a whole lot in this game, and if it's Lamar Jackson, they're definitely not going to throw the ball a whole lot. So I am worried about John Brown. I would struggle to figure out who to play if I had John Brown and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I might lean towards MVS, honestly.
Now, Jeff, what do you think? Davis, Cooper, Brown, where do you have them?
With Davis, this is a guy I've been talking about all season long. And early in the year, people immediately, the Boo Birds come out in September, right, for fantasy purposes. And I pointed out there was a play, I forget what week it was, maybe week 3 or so, where I said, just watch him play. Like, don't worry about the fantasy stats. Watch him play. Watch this stiff arm. And, of course, I got a bazillion, oh, that's great in my points per stiff arm league. And it's like, bro, that is not the point. The point is the guy can play football. And we saw it against the Eagles. And then, of course, hey, Marcus Mariota struggles. Now he looks like he's finally clicking. Now Matt LaFleur looks like he has the team on the same page. And Corey Davis can ball. And not only that is he seeing such a large target share. Only DeAndre Hopkins seeing a larger target share this season of team target share. So that's enormous right there. He's an every week wide receiver too. If he gives you a couple bad weeks, the sky isn't falling. You shouldn't drop him. People did that. People dropped Corey Davis.
Oh, and I picked him up. I loved it. Where I didn't draft him, but I drafted him like everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people overreact there. So for me, he's the top option out of those 3. Cooper, though, I mean, quietly trending up. I mean, this is sort of sweet redemption for Amari Cooper. He's on the same page with Dak Prescott. Like, looks like he really just fits in well in Dallas, better than he ever fit in Oakland, it seems like, because out of those first 2 games, they weren't spectacular, but they were maybe better than we thought. In 9 targets last week, he's getting work in the red zone. I really like the fit for him, so I have him at 24, and John Brown is just outside for me right now at 25, and it's that balancing the upside, the ceiling and floor with him that is the trick, because as Tags mentioned, if Lamar Jackson is in there, then that kind of tanks things. I mean, he certainly could rip off a long touchdown, but you don't want to rely on that. I always want to lean more towards floor than towards ceiling.
Yeah, I've got Cooper 16, I've got Davis 19, I've got John Brown at 25. I actually think I like Michael Crabtree a little bit better than John Brown the rest of the season, just because he gets so many targets, and I love their strength of schedule the rest of the year. Now, Jeff, this is something that I've been saying. I don't have the stats to back it up, but I feel like you probably have this information somewhere. I'm looking at Corey Davis's, his schedule at the beginning of the season: Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey, Tre'Davious White, Jimmy Smith, Casey Hayward. Has he had the most difficult schedule of any receiver in the league?
I don't have that offhand here. I mean, I can tell you it's up there. I mean, the situations where he's seen shadow, he saw Trey White for about half the game in week 5 and was pretty much blanketed. Tre'Davious White being, very good this season. He saw AJ Bouye in a shadow in week 3 for about half the game in that one. He saw Casey Hayward. Casey Hayward shut him down. That was 59% of the snaps in that contest. And of course, he saw Stephon Gilmore in shadow coverage last week, and which is the kind of the icing on the cake, though, because Gilmore heading into last week was allowing the lowest catch rate in the league out of, full-time starting corners. And he was, he's not shadowing chump change. I mean, Gilmore's been up against Sammy Watkins this season when Watkins on his hot streak. He was up against Marvin Jones, who obviously is up and down, but he's the number 1 receiver for that team. And so he's had these assignments over and over again. Allen Robinson, another one, not the most difficult, but still good receivers. Devontae Adams. He held Adams to 2 catches on 5 targets for 15 yards in week 9. And then Corey Davis goes out and absolutely torches him. I mean, that shouldn't be understated, and it's not an indictment of Gilmore. Gilmore's still playing good football this season.
He looked great last week. Davis was just making incredible plays.
Yeah, and he was forcing Gilmore to essentially, PI. I mean, there were a couple plays where he had to.
Well, and a couple plays where they didn't call it, where he was playing so physical with Davis, and Davis was still dominating. Like I was talking in the last episode, I think Davis, I counted how many dominators there are at wide receiver that can truly take over a game. and I put Davis in that conversation. There's only like 11, 12 of them. I really think he's that talented. Now, the offense isn't, up there with some of these other offenses. Marcus Mariota is not going to turn someone into Mike Evans, but I think Davis is every bit as talented when I watch him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's the next coming of Terrell Owens. I really do.
I had him as Brandon Marshall 2.0, so I like it.
Yeah, he has that athleticism. He's so young yet, and the thing about the wide receiver position is there are nuances that come out as these guys get older. I mean, you look at like somebody like Odell Beckham Jr., who immediately hit the ground running, but Odell Beckham Jr. is a much more nuanced receiver today than he was in his rookie season, and we know how spectacular he was. We're seeing the spectacular coming out of Davis, but in the next 3 or 4 years, we're really going to see this guy emerge as a star.
I think we would all agree here, even with Davis having a good week last week, I think it's still in the buy low window for Dynasty because I don't think people realize just how good he is. Let's keep moving along, though. We've got Tyler Boyd at ECR, that's Expert Consensus Rankings, number 23 this week against Baltimore. And he's someone, same with Allen Robinson, faced Minnesota. I don't love the matchups. I'm not exactly sure what to do with them. Tags, we'll let you go first here. What do you think about Boyd and Robinson this week?
I'm not totally against Boyd. I do believe he's going to get more targets. The Bengals just ran so few plays last week. The possession was dominated. I don't think the Ravens are going to dominate time of possessions like the Saints did. So you're going to see more attempts. The Saints have done some really interesting things with slot receivers. When you've watched them, they've kind of brought a safety down and kind of bracketed a slot receiver, which is really difficult to do. But Tyler Boyd, I still think that he sees 7-8 targets in this game against Tavon Young. It's actually the best matchup on the field against the Ravens because when you go out to Jimmy Smith and Brandon Carr, it's just you don't get anything done against those guys. So if the Bengals are going to move the ball at all, I think it's got to go through Boyd. It's got to go through Mixon, and Mixon, obviously, as we know, doesn't have a great matchup. So I have Boyd at number 21. And as for Allen Robinson, I don't think that it's as bad as matchup as we thought it was going to be at the beginning of the season. Xavier Rhodes hasn't been the same cornerback that he's been over the last couple of years. He's allowing a rather high catch rate in his coverage. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's a career high, like near 65%. And on top of that, he's dealing with a foot injury that he's been trying to play through. I know they just had their bye, but Allen Robinson, man, he's just as good as a wide receiver. And with Mitch Trubisky throwing the ball the way that he is, it's difficult to say that, you want to bench Allen Robinson right now. I have him at 22, so I don't think Allen Robinson is like, he's like a must play like a Corey Davis. But I do think that he's a fine play as like a borderline wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3.
Jeff, we like to talk about all these cornerbacks all the time and matchups to avoid and everything like that. And most casual fantasy players, they know a couple of the guys like Xavier Rhodes and everything like that. But I don't think they realize that sometimes Xavier Rhodes doesn't just shadow people. He only goes against them 60, 70% of the game. Now, are there some cornerbacks that we should be aware of who have really come into that elite territory who are shadowing and should make people nervous?
In terms of new shadows, I don't know if necessarily there's any new per se that really would make you nervous. I mean, there are guys who are shadowing who really wouldn't inspire much fear in you or instill much fear. James Bradbury, for example, and we saw Dante Jackson. Basically, the Panthers are using all three of their corners as shadows at this point, like New England has historically, though they don't always do that this year. They almost have a little bit of a rotation in there, but not necessarily. I don't think there's guys who are emerging. There are guys who are playing good football. There's no doubt about it. Desmond King is having a phenomenal season for the Chargers. Byron Jones has been fantastic. I mentioned the Bears corners. Basically, all of them have played really well this season, but nobody new on the block per se. I do agree though with Tagliere here with Tavon Young, my fellow Temple Al. That is the best matchup to be had on the field there. So I'm in on Tyler Boyd. In terms of Xavier Rhodes, I mean, yes, he's not the player he was last year, but when he shadows, he's only seeing an average of 3.7 targets per game thrown into his coverage since week 2.
And that's against the best wide receivers usually.
Yeah, and he shadows every single week. Even in situations where you don't think it's like the most standout shadow opportunity, he'll still be shadowing somebody for the most part. So, if it's Allen Robinson coming back to earth a little bit this week, I mean, I think he's still playing as a wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside. But if he comes back to earth, don't panic. Don't be like, oh, see, I told you. I mean, it happens. There are very few players out there who are essentially matchup proof. Like what we're seeing with Todd Gurley is truly unbelievable when you think about it, that he can produce, even in the most difficult matchups, he can still produce RB1 numbers. That just does not happen.
All right, Tags. Any wide receivers that most people have within their top 40 that you are recommending as a fade this week?
I'm not a huge fan of Cortland Sutton this week. I know a lot of people view him as like an every week play with Demaryius Thomas out of town, but I'm not necessarily sure about that. With Emmanuel Sanders playing over half of his snaps or running half of his routes from the slot, I don't know if they waste Casey Hayward on him, because that would put Hayward to waste on half the snaps, whereas Cortland Sutton only goes into the slot about 20% of the time. So what's your projection on this, Jeff? Do you see Casey Hayward shadowing Cortland Sutton? And if that's the case, I don't think Cortland Sutton's a top 36 play.
I mean, that would fit the way that the Chargers have used him. They tend to use him on bigger-bodied receivers like Sutton. And as I mentioned, King is playing so well in the slot that they have confidence in him. If he's going to have to go up against somebody like Manny Sanders, then I don't think that's a big issue. So I actually do have Sutton seeing a lot of Hayward. I don't know if it's a true shadow, but he's going to see enough to put a damper on his fantasy value.
Jeff, I love this Chargers team. Like, obviously, I think everyone would agree the Chiefs are probably the favorite in the AFC. Who do you have number 2? Is it the Patriots still?
Ooh, yeah, I think so. Because you can't count them out in January.
Yeah. This is probably going to be the first time they don't have a bye. We were talking about it on yesterday's show. It looks like the Steelers probably have the upper hand right now.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how this all finishes out. But right now, fresh in everybody's mind is this defeat. But when you look at the 2 games that the Patriots have kind of stunk up the joint this season, it was against Belichick disciples, like both of them, which is really fascinating. Everybody wants to find a reason to tell you that the Patriots are officially over. They aren't over. Remember back in September when they were over? They aren't over. They find a way to play up. And of any coaching regime in recent or maybe of all of NFL history, I don't think we've ever seen a regime who is more capable of catering a system to their players and getting the players to buy fully into that system, even if they aren't elite guys, so that they are clicking when you get into January. And they may not make the Super Bowl this year, but they're going to be around and they're going to be serious contenders.
Absolutely. I love it. Tags, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with Jeff on this 100%.
Okay, I've got the Patriots number 1, actually. I think they're the favorites over the Chiefs, but I've got the Chargers number 3 behind the Chiefs. Let's keep moving on here. I'll give you guys 4 names here. You pick your favorite 2. All right, we've got Calvin Ridley face Dallas. Anthony Miller face the Vikings. Dante Moncrief face the Steelers. And Chris Godwin at the Giants. Jeff, you're first.
I think out of those guys, Calvin Ridley tops it for me. And it's super close. The problem with Moncrief is the volume. I mean, Dede saw the volume last week. Moncrief just ripped off revenge game. He ripped off a big touchdown, but every game's a revenge game, right?
He made the defender miss that easy tackle. It was all Moncrief.
We're going to have revenge on revenge this week. I can't wait. Sammy Watkins, Marcus Peters, revenge on revenge. It's the revenge to end all revenge. Because we need to end revenge, seriously. But, I'm going to go Anthony Miller just slightly, so close over Moncrief. I got to keep pointing out, Chris Godwin's the number 4 receiver, I just don't want to trust Chris Godwin.
I'm such a sucker for Chris Godwin. Every time I see him have one of these big games, I'm like, finally, the Bucs are waking up. He's their second best receiver. Play the man. I don't want to hear you say that, Jeff, but I think you're right. Tags, what do you think, man?
I have Calvin Ridley as my top 1. I have Godwin there ahead of Anthony Miller. I mean, the thing is Miller, I feel like the Bears game against the Vikings is going to be somewhat of a low-scoring affair. And Anthony Miller, he had a good game last week, but it was against the Lions team that's really struggled against the slot receiver. So I'm not like, I have Miller at like 42. But I have Godwin at 39. Moncrief is the easy one out for me.
Oh, okay. I've got him number 2, so maybe I need to reconsider because it seems like you guys both are down on Moncrief. I mean, last week was the only week where he wasn't really leading this team in targets. He's getting the deep targets. He's getting the red zone targets. I think he's the most talented. I like Westbrook, but I think Moncrief's the most talented now that he's healthy.
But Joe Hayden is going to be on him, and Hayden's been really good.
I don't like any of those 3 behind Ridley. And I don't especially like Ridley this week either. Okay, let's get one more group of guys. Then I will ask you both if there's one sneaky play. We'll move on over to tight end and DST to close out the show. So let's get some deeper plays here. Josh Reynolds faced Kansas City. DJ Moore against Detroit. And let's go with Traquan Smith faced Philadelphia. Tags, your first this time.
DJ Moore, easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Jeff?
I have Josh Reynolds.
Ooh.
Okay.
They're close, but the fact of the matter is that he's going to be an every down guy, and we know that there's upside in that offense. And if somehow the Chiefs manage to contain one or the other, Cooks or Woods, which I love both of those guys this week, then you could see a little bit of Josh Reynolds. So it's super close, though. And by the way, I should throw this out there. I mentioned this on the radio this morning, but the fact that Pharoh Cooper is now being activated from injured reserve, I don't think we should immediately place much stock into that, but I also don't think we should completely write it off, because Pharoh Cooper was a slot receiver at the college level and a very capable one at that. And, he's more, Josh Reynolds is an outside receiver in a spread offense at the college level. Whereas, if you look at more of a prototype slot receiver, would it be that outlandish to think that Pharoh Cooper makes an impact down the stretch? No. So just tuck it away, file it away. And if we see anything that would indicate that, just be prepared to pounce for fantasy purposes.
I like that one. All right, Tags, any sneaky plays?
I think Nelson Aguilar is a sneaky one for me. You're going to have Alshon Jeffrey getting Marshawn Lattimore treatment, which means Nelson Aguilar is going to see a lot of Eli Apple, and that's just a good matchup for anybody.
Okay.
Seriously, and that game has one of the higher over-unders of the week. There should be, I don't anticipate the Eagles being able to run the ball in New Orleans, so I think they're going to have to go to the air, and I think Golden Tate and Nelson Aguilar are good plays this week.
I like Kiki QT this week against Washington, coming off the bye. Obviously, he's been dealing with the injury, but I think he's had 3 weeks now. I think that's sufficient time for him to recover, and he's got 30 targets in 3.5 games. I think he gets, I'm not going to say more than that, but he continues to get plenty of targets with Demaryius Thomas replacing Will Fuller. So I like the QT start this week off the bye, as long as he's not showing up in the injury report. Jeff, what do you think about Aguilar and QT, and do you have another name for us?
I'm curious to see how much Golden Tate's role increases. Only ran 32% of routes this past week, and I think they're going to ramp him up, and that's going to put a damper on Aguilar. QT is interesting now. Again, if we've learned anything from this season, though, hamstring injuries are very tricky, so we'll see with that one. I think you should own him, but I'm not rushing out to start him in any leagues. The name that I think we kind of we have to look at a little bit here, and the matchup stinks, but it's the target volume that's encouraging, is John Ross. He had 8 targets. He did out-target Tyler Boyd last week. Now, I'm not very high on him. I have John Ross at 50, but you could be in a situation in a deeper league where you're kind of desperate and you need that higher ceiling play. He had 2 end zone targets last week, caught the one, obviously. Now, only caught 2 of 8 targets, but if he sees volume again, he is the type of player with his speed. The one way you can beat almost any defense is if you get a guy with amazing speed like that. We've seen it time in and time out with Tyreek Hill. If you can get the ball in his hands in the right spot in the field, that's all it takes for him to take it to the house. But again, it's not the most reliable play.
If Sammy Watkins is out again, Jeff, is Chris Conley in play?
No.
Yeah, I don't know why they don't use him, but whatever. Okay, let's move on over to tight end. Same thing as always. We've always got the 8 obvious plays, and then after that, it is an absolute train wreck. So let's talk about those guys. Actually, I'm going to include Jack Doyle in there. I think he's an obvious play, but a lot of people are thinking about benching him. I've got him at number 8, face Tennessee. Some people have Ebron ahead of him. I don't have Ebron in my top 12. Tags, where do you have these two?
I have Doyle at number 8, and I have Ebron at 9. I'm curious to hear Jeff's take on this. I think everybody knows my take by now in terms of follow targets, follow snaps, follow routes run, and everything points to Doyle. But
also follow Andrew Luck to tight ends.
Well, that too. Obviously, that's why we liked Jack Doyle coming into the year. But Jeff, what's your take on this? Because obviously Ebron's getting targets where it matters most, and he's producing on them, so we can't just simply overlook him.
We can't. He's second in the league in end zone targets. Only Antonio Brown has been targeted in the end zone more. 14 for Brown, 13 for Ebron. Now, a good chunk of that obviously happened with Doyle out, but it was even happening in the very beginning of the season when he was playing. But you bring up that key point. Eric Ebron had that production. He had 3 touchdowns. One of them a rushing touchdown. Obviously, when do you expect that? Everybody predicted that one. He did it in 20 snaps. Jack Doyle played 45 snaps. To me, it's obvious that Jack Doyle is the better play, and you can't just follow the box score. You can't just follow the fantasy points if you're freaking out about this. Everybody losing their minds because they didn't play Eric Ebron last week, and I've told people over and over and over again, and there was the right play. It didn't work out the right way, but it was the right play, and if you continue to make the right plays over the long run, you're going to be a fantasy winner. If you try and get cute over the long run, you're going to be a fantasy loser because you're going to be making the wrong plays. So going back to it, Jack Doyle I have at 7, Eric Ebron I have at 10. So you're still probably going to play Eric Ebron this week, but if you have both of them, I still would lean towards Doyle. And by the way, I think that might be ambitious saying that there's 8 who you can start. I think there's just 2 this week. That's it.
Pretty much.
Kelsey and Ertz. I mean, Kittle's on bye. So what else can you do?
Here's the guys we've got: Olsen, Howard, Burton, Graham, Ingram. That's ECR top 7, and I've got them in a little bit different order. So you guys say you would start Ebron. Would you start him over Jared Cook against Arizona, Vance McDonald against Jacksonville, Jordan Reed against Houston?
I would. Jordan Reed's close, though.
I'd have Cook ahead of him. Jordan Reed, he's the most heavily targeted non-running back to not be targeted in the end zone. He has over 50 targets. He has 0 end zone targets.
Why?
Like, this is not a fluke. Because Alex Smith doesn't throw to the end zone. 9 end zone throws. Matt freaking Barkley had 4 end zone throws last week in 25 attempts. Alex Smith has 301 attempts and 9 end zone throws. That is the problem with that team.
And they're going to make the playoffs.
That is the problem with that team.
Like, if something clicks, I think this Washington team could be really dangerous. Because their defense has been so much better, and they've got some weapons. They just need to get healthy, and Alex Smith needs to pull his head out of his butt. I don't know if he will, though. He's pretty old. We haven't mentioned Austin Hooper, who we've got in the top 10. Kyle Rudolph, a lot of people are still asking about. Would you play either of these guys? Jeff, we'll let you go first.
Hooper, I think, at this point has kind of earned it, given his usage. When you come off an 11-target game. By the way, Jeff Hireman coming back. He had an 11-target game the last time we saw him, but I'm not going to get, too ambitious with him. I think you're looking at, priority streamer this week would be Vance McDonald. I have him 1 spot ahead of Kyle Rudolph. Then I have Ricky Seals-Jones and Jeff Hireman. Those guys are all outside of the top 12, but they're in play. Ricky Seals-Jones, 9 targets last week. So all of those guys are in play, but just realize that you could start Ricky Seals-Jones and he could get 1 catch for 4 yards. Like, you could start Jeff Hireman and Matt Lacoste gets in the end zone. Like, this is just what's going to happen this year at tight end. Like, you're not alone. And this is ultimately, hopefully this is the impetus for us to either A, start prioritizing tight ends at the college level, which they aren't going to do, or B, start collapsing the tight end position into the wide receiver position and just doing away with it for fantasy purposes.
Now, Tags, Vance McDonald tore up the Jags. I think it was week 17 last year for, 120 yards. Do you put any stock into stuff like that when you're building your rankings?
Not really. It's a different Jags team, obviously, and there's other parts of the defense that could be exploited. So I have Vance McDonald at 16 in my rankings right now. It's not to say that he's a bad play, but I think Jeff, that's why I like having Jeff on the show. Obviously, there's a lot of things that I'll repeat that he'll say is that there's so much volatility at tight end. You kind of have to just follow the targets. I love Ricky Seals-Jones this week, but it's very likely that there's not a lot of passing volume in that offense, and he could end up with just 3 or 4 targets, and then he has to do his damage on them. Granted, that can happen against Oakland because they're terrible against tight ends, and it's not even close. But, I mean, guys like Jordan Reed, I think you play them. I know there's a lot of people upset with that. I get people asking me every single week, should I drop Trey Burton? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, have you guys taken a look at the landscape of tight ends on the waiver wire? Because if you haven't, I suggest you do it. So
who are you gonna pick up? I'm sorry for laughing at people, but I don't understand that one. Trey Burton's not having a bad season. He's just not dominating like some of the other guys.
Yeah, he hasn't had a crazy amount of targets, but he's been performing from a fantasy standpoint.
He's though tight end number 6 in fantasy right now.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And he's done it he's seen I think 4 less targets in I want to say 5 of the last 6 games or something like that. But he's performing, so that's all that matters.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on over to DST. And there's some obvious streamers. Arizona face Oakland. We've got Pittsburgh face Jacksonville. I don't know if they're really a streamer though. They're owned in a lot of leagues. Let's go to the more difficult ones, though. We've got Indianapolis face Tennessee, the Giants face Tampa, and Jacksonville face Pittsburgh. Jeff, if you have to choose one of those 3, who are you going with?
Isn't it crazy that Jacksonville could be potentially a streamer right now? How about that? You draft them in the 8th round. How you feel right now, everybody?
They're outside the top 20 defenses.
And we're playing the Giants over them this week.
Oh my God.
That's where we are right now. And the Giants defense obviously is not really that good. There are component parts of that defense, though, that you like. I mean, obviously Landon Collins is a pretty solid safety, and everybody in IDP leagues knows that. But I like them better. I think that if the Panthers are available, and they were starting the weekend in about 45% of leagues, I think was the number, that could be your best option. But we said it earlier. Anytime Ryan Fitzpatrick plays, you could have a 6 interception game, right? And if you get 6 interceptions, you're probably going to score on at least one of them. So let's roll with the Giants over the Jacksonville Jaguars. How the tables have turned.
I definitely agree with that. I've got Indianapolis, New York, and Jacksonville in that order. Tags, do you like these three or somebody else ahead of them?
Indy's tough for me. They haven't been generating any pressure on quarterbacks, and if Mariota gets time, he's actually been better. So I don't, and he's not turnover prone, so I really don't want to play Indianapolis. The Giants are in a bad matchup because obviously that offensive line does allow a lot of sacks. Ryan Fitzpatrick straight degaffs it half the time, and if he gets benched, then they go to Jameis Winston, who's also turnover prone. So it's not like they're escaping a turnover prone quarterback. So I guess the Giants of those options would be my pick.
What about like Tampa face Eli Manning, Oakland face Josh Rosen?
I am not playing Tampa against anyone.
Yeah, I don't want to play Tampa or Oakland no matter what.
Yeah, no, those teams, no, stay far away. And if that's the thing, if you guys listen to the waiver wire show that we had, if my article that comes out on Saturday mornings that talks about defenses, you would have Arizona on your team already, and Arizona is the best streaming play.
All right, guys, that's all for the start sit talk. I do have 2 quick questions though. Okay, Jeff, where is Le'Veon Bell going to play football next year?
Oh, man. Hopefully somewhere, but I think that the Jets obviously have to be a viable candidate here. And if he goes to the Jets, that you could pretty much kiss your Le'Veon Bell fantasy value goodbye. I'm also hoping, though, that the Eagles are in play. As of next year, if you look at it right now, I don't think they have the cap room to do what Le'Veon Bell is going to want. That's going to be the other thing. I mean, once we get past the Super Bowl, I mean, yes, we're going to talk about the combine, but there's going to be a ton of talk about Le'Veon Bell. And I don't think, it's not going to end until we get to free agency, and just the amount that he's going to ask for it's just crazy for an older running back. But hey, what do I know? I thought he was going to come back after 2 weeks. But I think, Philly would be very, very interesting. And that would be probably one of the better landing spots for his overall fantasy value. So Jeff, real quick, Bob, before you ask your next question, you're a Philadelphia guy. Okay. I legitimately got into an argument with my friends and I, we have all of our home league. We have this group text and we were talking about this and I was like, they wanted the Bears to sign Le'Veon Bell this offseason. I'm like, no, I'm not paying $15+ million for Le'Veon Bell. You don't need him in this offense. And how do you feel as an Eagles fan? Would you be okay if they spent $15 million? Let's say that the number is $15 million a year. Would you be okay with the Eagles signing him? No, I mean, so when you're prioritizing things, obviously, number one, you want a quarterback. Philly's good there. You want a solid offensive line. They're good there. You want good pass rushers. Philly's good there. The next thing, though, is you want guys who can cover. And Philly is downright terrible there. So either they have to do an incredible job drafting there, or are there guys available to sign on in free agency? Typically, we do see some guys, but if you reach free agency, it's probably a good sign that maybe you aren't the best to sign. I don't know, but to spend that much money on a running back in this era where you can get running backs on day 3 of the NFL draft to potentially contribute to your team immediately, and certainly on day 2 of the NFL draft, and you're paying them nothing, I don't think it would be a good use. And that's the thing that kind of holds me back here, is because Howie has been so smart with how he's run the team in the post-Chip era that I really don't see Philly doing that. It would feel more like, sorry, Jets fans, like a Jets move or one of these teams that hasn't been run particularly well over the last, half decade. Yeah, I ran a poll yesterday and 44% of people picked Houston as the landing spot. A lot of people were really mad I didn't include Indianapolis in the poll, but I think Marlon Mack is good. Why would they go out and get Le'Veon Bell? My 2 teams that I'm curious about, the Miami Dolphins, because he was spending all that time down in Miami, and then Baltimore. How sweet would the revenge be for Le'Veon Bell to go to Baltimore? And I think they need a running back. Yeah, they do. They do. We'll see the new regime, though. Obviously, they're going to take things in a different direction. And, because Ozzy's in a lame duck season here. I don't know if that's a move that they'll make. It would be very uncharacteristic of Baltimore, but you are right. They need to do something at running back.
All right, guys, last question here. And Jeff, we'll let you go first again. Where does Jameis Winston play football next year?
What team is Christian Hackenberg? No, I kid. I mean,
he's going to start somewhere, right?
It's you would have to think a young player like that. This would be a complete debacle if he in fact is not under center for Tampa Bay. And now, why are they doing this? Of course, they have the contract thing, but this is also a Dirk Cutter regime that is fighting for their lives at this point. They want to keep their jobs. And obviously, if you go down with Winston, you're going to go down with that ship, and you're going to lose your job potentially before he does. I think it's still Tampa, but I honestly couldn't tell you. There's going to be obviously a lot of teams will be in the market for his services, even with the turnover-prone nature of his game.
Tags, there's a couple quarterbacks who could retire this offseason. Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Big Ben, maybe even Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning. Could he end up with one of these teams? I've got him with the Steelers.
I don't think so. I don't think Roethlisberger's retiring. I think it's like the Brett Favre thing with him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I actually think that Jameis Winston's going to spend maybe the rest of his career in Tampa, because like the way I see it, I think Dirk Cutter's going to get fired here shortly.
Yeah, but they've removed him from their images on their stadium and billboards. Like, I don't think they want this guy being the face of their franchise.
Well, it's something they had to do. It's kind of like Oiko's getting rid of Cam Newton when the whole thing went down in the media. Like, you have to protect that image, and like by doing stuff like that, it'll help preserve that image. But as time goes on, people forget. Nobody talks about Joe Mixon anymore in terms of what he did off the field. Nobody talks about Tyreek Hill, what he did off the field. So people will forget. People will forgive.
You don't think it's different with a quarterback, though?
In a way, maybe, but if they didn't cut him, I don't think that they're just going to let him walk, because they don't have a long-term solution. Ryan Fitzpatrick's a career journeyman for a reason. He's not going to be your franchise quarterback.
And if anything, this could be leveraged for them from a contract standpoint, because obviously the contract thing, if he gets hurt, then they're on the hook for a lot of money here. So that there's a lot of moving parts with this one. It's pretty complicated, but I do agree with Tags. I don't think Cutter is going to have a job. And if in fact it works out that way, if in fact Jameis stays there, that is still somewhat appealing, believe it or not. Obviously, they have an in-house coordinator who's his name, Todd Monken's name, is going to be thrown around when the new jobs are out there, because he's done such an incredible job with that offense, and it's very exciting. It's an appealing job if they don't keep him in-house, because we've seen them do that move already. And that organization is always kind of run a little bit differently from the rest of the league, and I'll be nice when I say it that way. It's going to be interesting. That's a prize job, even with Jameis and the way that things have kind of gone over the last 16 months or so.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's all for today's show. Jeff, as always, it was a pleasure having you on. Lots of fun to chat with you about all this.
Absolutely. I enjoyed every time, guys.
All right. Take care. And thanks to the sponsors of today's show, Roman, where you can go to getroman.com/fantasypros for a free online visit, and FanDuel.com, where they've got contests for everyone, for non-experienced players, for experienced players who want a chance to win some big dollars. Check out FanDuel.com. And remember, we've also got the signed Dalvin Cook helmet giveaway at FantasyPros.com/contest. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.